Hey everyone, it's Alexander the Real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. So this was supposed to come out this weekend. That clearly didn't happen. Hopefully it will in August. Hopefully. So yeah, let's just rank the DC Extended Universe films. Again, just like with the other lists, I'm ranking these movies from my least favorite to my favorite. And if you've been following the channel for some time, you might already know what my favorite and least favorite movie in the series is, which shouldn't be that much of a surprise, but nevertheless, let's get this thing started. Number 8. Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. I honestly don't like talking about this movie. Not just because I despise this movie and I think it's one of the worst films of the last decade, at least within the comic book genre, but I hate talking about this movie because it upsets me that I hate this as much as I do, because I wanted this to be good. There was actually a point when this movie was coming out that I was actually excited for this more than I was Captain America: Civil War, because I really wanted to see DC succeed with their own cinematic universe. And yet this movie is just so incredibly long. The plot is overcomplicated. There's too much in it. The fact that this movie features Batman, Wonder Woman, and all of this setup to Justice League and Darkseid takes away from the idea that this could be a sequel to Man of Steel, because the attention is taken away from Superman, who in this movie is just dour, uninteresting, and proves that Zack Snyder does not really understand these characters at all, especially with Superman, who in this movie comes across as somebody who hates saving people, and then on the other side we have Batman, who is just mowing down people with a gun, running over people with his Batmobile. Like, he is a murderous psychopath. Everything that Batman is not supposed to be. Wonder Woman is completely useless in this movie. All the setups to Justice League and Darkseid stop the movie dead in its tracks. And the less that's said about Jesse Eisenberg's performance as Lex Luthor, the better. So yeah, I wanted to love this movie. As much as I have just expressed my hatred for this movie, I really wanted to love it, and it bums me out that I don't. Number 7. Suicide Squad. This movie is often at the bottom of everyone else's list in the DC Extended Universe, and it must be pretty blasphemous of me to put this above Batman vs. Superman. But the reason I think that this is a slightly better movie than Batman vs. Superman is because I didn't have high hopes going into this movie. From the trailers, I never once thought Suicide Squad was going to be any good, and compared to Batman vs. Superman, where I walked out of that movie angry and frustrated, I walked out of this movie going, it's bad, but it's not god-awful. And clearly I'm one of the few people out there that thinks this movie is not god-awful. The things that save this movie for me are Will Smith, even though he's pretty much playing Will Smith again. He doesn't really transform into Deadshot. Even though Margot Robbie's performance as Harley Quinn in this movie is very inconsistent, she is one of the other highlights of the movie. It's definitely a more colorful movie than Batman vs. Superman, while not as visually striking as Batman vs. Superman. It definitely does not have the same dull tones that movie did. But even then, with me saying that Suicide Squad is a better movie than Batman vs. Superman, does not mean that Suicide Squad is good, because the action is just very dull and uninspired. The exposition in this movie is straight up horrible. The editing is a downright mess. Character motivations are completely inconsistent. And much like with Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor, the less that's said about Jared Leto's Joker, the better. In the past few weeks, there's just been this sudden call for the David Ayer's cut of Suicide Squad, similar to the Release the Snyder Cut campaign, which, I mean, I would normally say that that's never going to happen and the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad doesn't exist, but after what happened a few weeks ago, I am just going to keep my damn mouth shut. Number 6. Man of Steel. This movie is incredibly frustrating for me because there is a lot that I really like and even admire about this movie. I think the opening sequence on Krypton is actually pretty cool, and probably the most developed that this planet has ever been in any of the Superman movies. The cast of this movie is pretty stellar, ranging from Henry Cavill, Amy Adams, Kevin Costner, Russell Crowe, Lawrence Fishburne, Michael Shannon. It's a top-notch cast. It's got some interesting ideas, and there are a few select moments in this movie where Superman is actually Superman, and that's pretty damn cool. However, a lot of the decisions that this movie makes just do not work within the spirit of Superman. Jonathan Kent's cynical tone throughout this entire movie is just incredibly off-putting, and his death at the hands of a tornado is just laughably stupid. And then in terms of the action scenes, while they might look cool, Superman has a complete disregard for all human life, especially with the one-on-one fight between him and General Zod in Metropolis. They are throwing each other into buildings, and not once does Superman go out of his way to save people. The only time he's ever put in a position where he has to save people, it's the scene where Superman breaks Zod's neck, and the neck-breaking moment is actually not the thing that bothered me. What bothers me is that Superman could have just lifted Zod up in the air to get the people out of harm's way. And also what bothers me is that the people Superman is trying to save are too stupid to not just get out of the way as Zod is slowly inching his eye lasers towards the people. There are some straight up idiotic scenes in this movie that really kick this franchise off on a very rocky note. Number 5. Justice League. You saw this movie end up in my list of guilty pleasures from the last decade, and I honestly will stand by that. I truly think it is a better movie than Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, even though the production issues with this movie are well documented, and rewatching it, you could definitely tell what parts were Zack Snyder's and what parts were Joss Whedon's. But honestly, I think it's a more consistent movie than Batman vs. Superman. It's a more entertaining movie than Batman vs. Superman. The dynamic between all the characters works, and this movie actually respects Superman more than the entirety of Batman vs. Superman ever did. I can't argue with any fans of Batman vs. Superman who hate this movie, because, again, it's not that good, and especially after seeing Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, how that movie pretty much retconned a lot of The Last Jedi, seeing this movie kind of retcon elements of Batman vs. Superman kind of makes me understand why so many people were frustrated with this movie. And with the announcement that Zack Snyder's Justice League is going to be released on HBO Max next year, well, first of all, I can eat my own words in saying that the Snyder Cut doesn't exist. Still not going to be a good movie. I don't have faith that it's going to be good. I imagine it's not going to be better than this Frankenstein of a mess that we have. And honestly, I'm more excited to see the reactions to Zack Snyder's Justice League than the actual movie itself. And just to see which version will truly be better. Zack Snyder's supposedly 4-hour long cut, or this 2-hour mumbled mess that I honestly find some joy in. Number 4. Aquaman. There was actually a point after I saw this movie for the first time where I just didn't like it. In fact, I actually preferred Justice League over this movie, but I actually rewatched the movie on HBO Max before doing this video, and I gotta say, it's a lot better than I thought it was when I first saw it. I've grown to appreciate this movie a lot more. It's actually a more consistent movie than Justice League is by comparison, and when I watched this movie and really paid attention to what was going on, I realized, oh, there is a reason why Black Manta in this movie, and if you cut him out, you actually cut out a big part of the movie that gets the plot going. The action's a lot more exciting than I gave it credit for, and all the stuff that I did like when I saw this movie originally, I still liked, like Jason Momoa as Aquaman. The visual effects are actually pretty good considering that this series has never excelled in special effects. And even though everyone's angry at Amber Heard, and I am too, she has good charisma and has a good chemistry with Jason Momoa. It's just everything with Patrick Wilson as King Orm is so serious that it honestly becomes laughable, and the point where he declares himself to be the Ocean Master. It's such a ridiculous line that I am amazed nobody was cracking up laughing at that line. And again, there's just too much going on in this movie to the point where it feels like 3 Aquaman movies rolled into one. It could have been a little tighter, it could have been a little more consistent, but I've actually learned to appreciate this movie more after seeing it a second time. Number 3. Shazam. Damn it, still doesn't work. But anyway, this is DC's equivalent to Deadpool in the sense that it's a movie that is pretty much I won't say poking fun at the genre, but it definitely deconstructs the genre and points out a lot of its cliches, a lot of its tropes, but it still manages to be a great self-contained movie on its own. It's lighthearted, it's got some great jokes, you like all these characters, Zachary Levi is just perfect in this role, and it can actually get into some very emotional places. There are a handful of scenes in this movie that, as funny and as comedic as this movie can be, they hit you on an emotional level, and I really mean hit you. The movie's biggest flaws, however, are in the villains. This series just doesn't really excel when it comes to villains, except for the next movie I'm going to talk about. But Mark Strong is just not that interesting of a villain. He's kind of petty when you get right down to it. And then also the special effects in this movie are absolutely terrible. Which again, this series has never excelled at special effects, but considering this movie didn't cost as much as Justice League or Batman vs. Superman, you can excuse the special effects this time around because they didn't have the budget that those movies did. It's a lot of fun. I don't know if I'd really call it a unique comic book movie the way so many other fans and critics are calling it, but there is no denying that this is fantastic and a breath of fresh air for this franchise. Number 2. Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. This movie and Shazam actually go back and forth on what my second favorite movie in the DC Extended Universe is, but ultimately I have to go with Birds of Prey, because Birds of Prey pretty much took everything that I didn't like about Suicide Squad and everything that didn't work about Suicide Squad and actually made it awesome. More than Suicide Squad, this is the movie that convinced me that Margot Robbie is Harley Quinn, the same way Christopher Reeve is Superman or Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. She owns this role, and the movie's weird and nutty style really lends to her character just being the nutcase that she is. The rest of the characters are fantastic, even though you don't really get the Birds of Prey until the end of the movie. And there are some characters in this movie, like Mary Elizabeth Winstead's Huntress, that are pretty much absent throughout most of this movie, which is a shame because she's actually my favorite character in this movie next to Harley Quinn. The action is very well choreographed, it's stylistic. Kathy Yan just directs the hell out of this movie and just gives it a very cool style that Suicide Squad just kind of butchered. And in my opinion, this has the best villain in the franchise. Ewan McGregor's Black Mask might not be a good representation of this villain, but he actually works considering the zany tone of this movie. And the R rating isn't just thrown in here just to cash off of the success of Joker, which is not on this list because it's not a DC Extended Universe film. There's a reason why this movie is rated R, and it works to the film's advantage. And the last thing I'll say before I move on to the number 1 movie, not since Chef have I ever seen a movie sexualize food the way that this movie sexualizes a grilled cheese sandwich. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, you can hate me for this, but I don't like grilled cheese sandwiches at all. But that looks good. Like, that looks mouth-wateringly good, and I gotta move on before I start drooling over this picture. Yeah, Birds of Prey. It's awesome. If you haven't seen it, please do yourself a favor and go see it, because it is so good. Number 1. Wonder Woman. Clearly, the 2 best movies in this franchise are when women are at the helm. Because the very first thing I thought to myself when I walked out of Wonder Woman is that if it takes men 3 movies to get something right and they can't do it, send in a woman and she'll do it in 1. Because at the time this movie came out, it was the best DC movie since The Dark Knight. And considering that I've become a fan of these comic book characters through these movies, this movie made me a fan of Wonder Woman, and made me convinced that Gal Gadot was truly an excellent pick as Diana Prince / Wonder Woman. This movie is definitely a cross between the first Thor and the first Captain America movie, considering that it's a period piece movie that takes place during a great war. But even then, it never feels like it's copying those 2 movies. It's its own thing. All the characters in this movie are just really fun, and all the sequences involving Diana Prince in this movie give me that sense of hope and joy in a comic book movie that Man of Steel was completely lacking. The entire No Man's Land sequence is proof of that. It's one of the most beautifully constructed scenes in terms of the genre and the franchise. Seeing Diana Prince just kind of go against what everyone else is saying and help people in need is inspiring. The action's exciting. And this movie actually made me appreciate the Wonder Woman theme a little more, even though I didn't like it in Batman vs. Superman. The only thing that really brings this movie down for me are the villain and the last 10 minutes, where it just looks like the ending to Batman vs. Superman all over again, with terrible CGI, and it just was not that appealing. It's easily the least interesting part about the movie, but the fact that this movie is at number 1 in the franchise for me, and the fact that I consider it one of the best movies of the last decade, is a testament to how good the rest of the movie is. I honestly do love this movie, and I really can't wait to see Wonder Woman 1984, when hopefully it comes out in August. But either way, I hope to see that movie in the theaters because I absolutely adore this first movie here. And there you go, that's my ranking for the entire DC Extended Universe. And I honestly can't wait for the rest of this franchise. The movies have been getting consistently better as they've gone on, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. But now I want to know what you guys think of this list and how you personally rank the DC Extended Universe films. Is your list not too different from mine? Is it drastically different than mine? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, leave a comment, support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until then, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.